Salutations. First thing I like to do is give a thank you and a shout out to all the organizers and everybody who's helped to put this event together. FUNL, Freedom Under Natural Law 2, Convergence, is an amazing top caliber conference, and I'm very honored and excited to be a part of this event and to be, you know, airing my presentation next to very, very well studied and very powerful light workers in this arena. So today I will be presenting my presentation on green language, a study of the occult meaning of words, etymology, phonetics, philology, puns, symbolism, and synchronicity. And you can check out some of my work at seedtruth.com or theonegreatnetwork.com. So without further ado, let's get right into the presentation. So when we're talking about green language, the first thing I'd like to point out is that there's going to be a lot of backlash against what I say, depending on what field of study that you come from. And this is just a general, small, little slide to break down the two fields that I feel will be the most, the people who will lash out the most. So the first thing is that people may consider this to be a form of apophenia, which is a general psychological term for when our brains perceive patterns where there aren't any. I hope to show you in this presentation that this is not the case. So I'm going to try to show you that what I'll be pulling out from green language, and I'll be going through everything so that you understand the basics of green language as well as we move through this presentation. But I'm going to show you that it's based upon a science. And as you come into a higher state of understanding, awareness, and consciousness, you will be able to utilize this in your own life. So the left-brainers, the atheists specifically, will associate this knowledge to religious thinking, when in fact it is antithetical to any dogmatic religious belief system, and it is based upon a scientific methodology. And then the right-brainers, the religionist, will associate this knowledge as heresy and a satanic ideology, when it is only a method for understanding deeper esoteric meaning of our languages and the connections to the one great spirit. So, in many areas, you would be attacked, especially by the religionists, for sharing this information. You would be called a heretic, and, many people would attack you, especially the religious zealots out there. So I just wanted to point that out, that these two imbalances here will be the most resistance you get with this. You're going to have the scientists and the atheists who think that, oh yeah, you're just reaching for these patterns. This is all just coincidence. And then you're going to have the religionists who are going to be like, oh, this is absolutely demonic and satanic, and you shouldn't have anything to do with any of this type of knowledge, which is absolutely not the case. And this type of mindset is actually what is wrong in the world. It keeps us in a power differential. It keeps us in a schism between the two imbalances of the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Green language is not just a form of wordplay. Yes, wordplay can be a part of it, but it has a much deeper importance that goes into both the physical and metaphysical realms. Contrary to the limited viewpoint from left-brained individuals who have scoffed at its credibility, green language has its roots deeply ingrained into the workings of the universe and human psychology. This is based upon the correct use of science and pattern recognition, which does not escape the rules of grammar and definition. The principles of language must first be understood if we are going to be clear in our communication. It is also important to not allow these guidelines to prevent our ability to consciously understand the improper use of grammar, definitions, and pronunciations. One may use language improperly, but yet we can still discern and find the patterns and pull the meaning out of that improper use of the language. So as an example of this, you can go to someone with a speech impediment, which most of us have at some level. You're probably going to catch me mispronouncing words in this, and you're probably going to find some improper use of grammar in this. So just understand, we have grammar Nazis out there, and it's good because it pushes us to be, better than what we were before. So we need to fine tune ourselves. We need to temper ourselves and get our grammar in alignment and use definitions properly. and try to understand pronunciation the best way that we can. But if you run into an autistic kid or a person who has a speech impediment, you also need to be able to understand them and not, attack them because they happen to have an issue, right? So you need to be able to pull the meaning out from what they are saying. You need to be able to come down to their level and understand through whether it's body language or sign language or whatever they may be using to communicate to you. As long as you can unify on the meaning, that's really the most important. As long as you can understand each other, that's what communication is all about, understanding each other. So for those who don't have some kind of mental issue or physical issue, we need to understand definitions because it's going to help us clarify the meaning of our words. And if we don't understand the meaning of our words, then we're not going to be, we're going to get into all these little arguments with each other about the semantics of a lot of stuff that's just, really meaningless when you get into it. It's just not useful. I don't mean it's meaningless. I just mean it's not useful. It's not productive. It's not going to help us evolve in any way. So what is etymology? Etymology comes from Latin etymologia and from Greek etymologia, which means the analysis of a word to find its true origin. So Greek etymos means true, real, actual sense of the original meaning of a word. And Greek logia means the study of or a speaking of. So etymology serves as the purpose to clarify the origins of words, which helps us to make use and understand the evolution of the meaning throughout time. There is a danger in the ability to control the meaning of words because then you can control the way people think when using those words. Definition is crucial when it comes to understanding language, and to get the most clarity and accurate definition, one must use etymology wisely. When one studies etymology, you will often find that the original meaning, the original root meaning of the word makes more sense than the current use of the word. And this is because a lot of our language has been controlled and obfuscated by the ruling class and the ignorant masses. So, I found this image online over here. If you're counting on the audience to know the ancient root of a word, we're going to have a bad time, and this is an instructor. Obviously, this is from South Park, an image from South Park. So the idea here is that etymology is one of the most profound and useful tools for an individual trying to learn how to communicate to other people, but also trying to learn the ideas throughout time. Because without etymology, we're never really going to understand how the ideas flow through time, and how the words or expressions for those ideas change over time, and why they are changing. What's happening that's making that happen? Is it controlled? Which most likely you're going to find that to be the case. Such as in the example of anarchy. The word anarchy has been obfuscated to look like it means chaos, chaos, terrorism, evil, something along these dark and negative lines of thinking. But in fact, it just means the absence of rulers and absence of slaves. So when you look it up, you'll find that out in the original meaning of the word, taking it back to Greek. So, we have to understand these things because we'll find that these words have been intentionally changed to mean the exact opposite of what it originally meant. So it's like taking a pen and then telling a child that that pen is a spoon over and over and over and over and over. And eventually they're going to believe that that pen is actually a spoon. And then when they go out to use that in the world, the idea of how you use a spoon is going to be completely different than how you use a pen. So they're not going to operate and function properly with that obscure and obfuscated definition. So something that I really wanted to talk about here is the etymological fallacy. And the etymological fallacy is something I find all over the place. I mean, it's insane how many people have argued with me about this because I use the actual, original meanings of the words, and then people will say, oh, that's a fallacy to do that. Well, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. we have to understand when it is and when it is not a fallacy. So, you know, to completely dismiss the origins of a word is fallacious in itself. It is dogmatic, and it's a way to dismiss understanding the ideas and how they move through time, like I said earlier. So an etymological fallacy is committed when an argument makes a claim about the present meaning of a word based exclusively, keyword here, exclusively, on the word's etymology, and holds a word's historical meaning to be its sole valid meaning, and that its present day meaning is completely invalid. This can be true in some cases, but should never be held as an absolute. So yes, definitions can change over time, and I'll explain that in a moment. The etymological fallacy can also be a fallacy itself when it is used to dismiss the word's origins as irrelevant to the current use of the word and its true meaning. This is due to the fact that the study of etymology is all about gaining clarity of the word's meaning, which must be all encompassing of both its origins and current use. So it's all about gaining the understanding of definitions, right? This is all about understanding definitions. So, you know, definitions are all about gaining clarity on meaning and truth. We can change definitions for the purpose of being more accurate to reality, but also we can do the opposite and change them to be less accurate to reality and more pulled away from that which is true. So it's really important to understand this, because this is very dangerous to make a word the definition of a word, its etymology, and to change that to mean something completely different, like I was just talking about with the spoon and with anarchism or with anarchy, because it takes us away from truth, and that's what we're trying to get in touch with, is the objective truth. So if we keep turning everything into more or into illusions and something that is not based in truth, you know, then we have an issue, obviously. It is important to understand that the control of language through methods like obfuscation has been devastating, has had a devastating effect on the human ability to think and communicate with clear understanding. The control of how we communicate is a powerful weapon to obscure truth and create individuals that have no bearing on the ideas that they wish to express and the ideas which they are programmed to believe. Weaponizing miscommunication through the control of definitions leads to epistemological breakdown and only serves to further the dark occult agenda to divide us from truth, reality, and each other. And this is also connected to the fallacy, which states that since someone used the fallacy, that their entire argument is completely invalid at that point. So this is really important, because I hear a lot of people doing this, like, oh, I use the actual etymology of the word government, you know, which means mind control. Gubernare mens mentes. It means to control the mind. And then they're like, oh, you can't use that because it doesn't mean that today. And it's like, well, no, that's just one way for them to deflect and get out of the truth of the case. Is that accurate? Is that definition accurate to what government actually is today? Yes, it is. That definition is accurate to what government actually is today. It is a form of mind control. It is a system that dictates the minds of individuals, you know, and that's what all this is all about. It's controlling the individual mind, which controls the way that they use their mind and their body in reality. So moving on. And as the great Manly P. Hall said, words are vehicles of ideas, and unless they are understood properly, misunderstanding is inevitable. What I'm trying to do here is to lay out a firm foundation for laymen and initiates to understand the concepts of all of these basic things that come into how we communicate with each other. And this will eventually unfold into green language. So we need to get all this stuff in, you know, under our belts so that we can move forward to understand why green language is actually not just some, you know, wordplay, like I said earlier. So what is philology? Philology just simply means love of learning, love of letters, love of study, literary culture. Okay? And you can look at the slide to see the definition of that. Obviously, we already broke down logos. Philos or philo means love. So it's love for word, speech, or love for learning and literature, linguistics, literary knowledge, things like this. In British English, the word philology denotates the historical study of language. Philology is the study of language in oral and written historical sources. It is the intersection of textual criticism, literary criticism, history, and linguistics, with especially strong ties to etymology. Philology is more commonly defined as the study of literary texts as well as oral and written records, the establishment of their authenticity and their original form, and the determination of their meaning. So, philology is the study of oral origins and their meaning, and especially written texts or literary texts and the meaning and the way it evolves throughout time. And just so everybody knows, I'm gonna be speeding through a lot of this stuff because I only have an hour to get through all this, and this is a big topic to get through. So I will be doing an extended version of this in the future, and I will be breaking these things down a bit more. Moving on, what is phonetics? Phonetics is a branch of linguistics that studies how humans produce and perceive sounds. The physical properties of vocal sounds. The field of phonetics is traditionally divided into three subdisciplines based on the research questions involved, such as how humans plan and execute movements to produce speech, articulatory phonetics, how various movements affect the properties of resulting sounds, acoustic phonetics, or how humans convert sound waves into linguistic information, auditory phonetics. Traditionally, the minimum linguistic unit of phonetics is the phone, a speech sound in a language which differs from the phonological unit of phoneme. The phoneme is an abstract categorization of phones. Phonetics deals with two aspects of human speech: production, the ways humans make sounds, and perception, the way speech is understood. Languages with oral or aural modalities, such as English, produce speech orally, using the mouth, and perceive speech aurorally, using the ears. Sign language, such as Australian Sign Language and American Sign Language, have a manual visual modality, producing speech manually using the hands and perceiving speech visually using the eyes. So why am I bringing all these things up? It's not just because the initiates need to understand these things, but these are all foundations in understanding the science of green language. Phonetics specifically has a direct, intimate relationship with green language. What is synchronicity? Now, I'm sure all of us here are familiar with synchronicity, okay? I would hope that every being that is watching this is familiar with synchronicity. But I figured I needed to add this in here because it's going to help clarify the synchronicity of green language. So, what is synchronicity? The quality or state of being synchronous, simultaneousness, chronological arrangement of historical events and personages so as to indicate coexistence. Also, a table showing such concurrences. Have you ever been thinking of someone and they called you the next minute, or dreamt of finding something precious and found it a few days later? According to Jung, these are examples of synchronicity. Examples of synchronicity can be observed in everyday life. It just takes a keen eye to observe it. Synchronicities can be recognized in the following signs. These are just some simple things to be aware of. You can find them in dreams, symbols, numbers, conversation and language, spontaneous encounters, and there's a plethora more. Every little aspect of life you can find synchronicity in. Synchronicity can also aid in awakening you to your full potential and serves as a guide for getting in touch with your inner self. Or in Jung's words, assist you on your path of individualization. Synchronicity is the universe saying you are getting warmer. Synchronicity is a concept popularized in the modern era by analytical psychologist Carl Jung, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, which holds that events are meaningful connections if they occur seemingly without causal relationship, yet are in fact meaningfully related at their roots. Jung used the concept in arguing for the existence of the paranormal and the spiritual. A wider study of the esoteric mysteries, like the 7 and 8 hermetic principles, brings to light the importance of synchronicity and shows a deeper connection to the all and each other. Synchronicities are not just coincidences. Rather, spiritual synchronicities are the universe aiding in our journey to deliver a message, provide guidance, teach us a lesson, or provide reassurance that we are all on the right path. Synchronicities tend to show up more when we are tapping into a higher state of consciousness and vibration. The ability to become aware of synchronicities relies upon pattern recognition. The higher our consciousness, the more accurate our pattern recognition, thus the more synchronicities we see. So moving on. So this is another esoteric study. This is Synchromysticism. So this is taking synchronicity and mysticism and combining them together. So what is synchromysticism? I know this is just like a presentation of definitions, right? Don't worry, I got more to bring out. So but like I said, this is a really condensed version of this presentation. So just bear with me. Synchromysticism, the vast and noble undertaking of piecing together the occult holographic language system of the universe in order to identify and more aptly understand the relationship between the collective consciousness, the higher self, the one great spirit, and all sentient beings on earth and beyond that. The drawing of connections of personal experiences and culture, like movies, music, musical lyrics, historical happenings, and esoteric knowledge, and finding connections that could be coming from the collective unconscious mind, and finding connections between the occult knowledge or esoteric fraternities, cults, and secret rituals, politics, and mass media. So Synchromysticism holds the idea that synchronistic events that are taking place have a mystical property to them, connecting to spiritual prospects. In most cases, to expand consciousness and awareness to the recipient of synchronistic connection, of the synchronistic connection. This takes place when you find important revelations through synchronistic connections that are not intentionally put there by human interaction. And this is very important because that last sentence there is crucial to understanding the mystical properties of synchromysticism. So it is something that is not intentionally embedded into the meaning or artistic properties of whatever it is you're looking at. It doesn't even have to be art itself. It can be political. It can be the media. It can be all kinds of stuff. And you find something that is revealed to you that helps you to understand it at a deeper level. So it's synchronistic, but also it's the alignment of yourself to a higher ability to communicate within the universe. So to me, it's the universe interacting with us and showing us through these synchronistic events that, you know, maybe something isn't what it looks to be on the exoteric level of it. And here is a quote from one of my favorite authors and his book, Esoteric Structure of the Alphabet. Not only were the sages constrained to adopt methods of crypticism of varied forms to safeguard precious, cosmic, and anthropogenic truth from desecration by the rabble, but they employed a technique which found its basic authentication in nature itself. As the world below is a mundane reflection and copy of an overshadowing world of spiritual truth, they strove to portray the structural forms of that higher truth by representing it under the forms of its counterparts everywhere existent in the natural world. Even supposed history was oriented into the form of archetypal ideologies, but everywhere in drama, ritual, choral dance, festival, institution, and in language, the astute formulators aim to incorporate their figures of fundamental archaea, or archaei, a great structure compounded of the elements of the cosmic logic of creation was interwrought into the patterns of all these modes of human cultural expression. Finally, if not perhaps initially, its structural design was woven into the formation of the alphabet. If this cryptic organic form was the structural principle determining the arrangement of the alphabet, it must be seen to have made its significance definitively basic in all literature. For thus the words themselves, carrying the elements of the original letter components, would constantly represent the forms of the archaic thought which as symbols they portrayed, so that in reconstructing the hidden outlines of meaning form in the alphabet, we are piercing to the heart's core of the most recondite connotations of all literature. Wow, that was a mouthful. So this is going to, I really want you to think about all this, because this is going to really help you understand green language, because we're going to be looking at the phonetics of green language, and the symbols themselves all retain an archetypal underlying essential meaning throughout history. And that's what that's like the simplest way that I can explain that here, but it's a really profound book, so I highly recommend looking into it. So moving on to the meat of the topic, what is green language? Now, this is this is the fun part. Now we got all that stuff out of the way. I mean, this is still kind of definitions and stuff, but you guys will enjoy this. So, what is green language? And here I have used the slide to represent green language, which is the two peacocks, and I'll explain why here in just a little bit. In all the mystery schools, the language of the birds was considered a secret and perfect language and the key to higher knowledge, sometimes also called langue verte, the language or green language. Green language, LOTB, was a type of communication for the initiated that allowed people across different centuries and cultures to understand and share ideas about the universe as well as cosmic or transcendental experiences through covert means. It got its name from the ancient idea that there was a magical language used by birds to communicate to humans and the one great spirit. English occultist John Dee likened the magical Enochian language he supposedly received from communications with angels to the notion of language of the birds. So green language is synonymous with the language of the birds, the emerald language, twilight language, angelic language, magical language, Enochian language, Adamic language, Kabbalistic language, language of light. There's so many different ones, and you just have to find the ubiquity within all these, and you will start to see the connections between all of them. Okay, because at their fundamental root, they're all connected. So emerald language is green language. Obviously, emeralds are green. Twilight language is about light. Just like language of the light. Angelic language is also about light. So these are all connected. And to me, the antithesis of this would be talking in tongues. So the religious idea of talking in tongues, what I would call the language of the serpents rather than the language of the birds. Green language is the expression of linguistic and literary patterns that manifest in synchronistic ways. This can either be intentionally and cryptically done or unintentionally and synchromystically manifested, either by means of the subconscious and or by the one great spirit. The study of green language helps us to unveil that which is not commonly known to the general public, meaning the esoteric, in order to bring about a deeper understanding of meaning. The hidden meaning of the language of the birds are revealed to us through patterns in things like phonetics, etymology, and anagrams, and many others. When we are aligned with truth and nature, this takes place when both the sacred masculine and sacred feminine principles are harmonized with each other to manifest true intelligence, which reveals the fractal unfolding of the symbolic language of the universe. So why the color green? Why is the color green so important? Why is this color being used to represent this? Well, symbolically, green is associated with balance, homeostasis, growth, activation, health, life, things like this. But we also have to recognize that green can also represent poison, toxicity, mold, acid, sickness. So green does not always represent something that is good for you. This would be a naturalistic fallacy because nature is not purely a force that only stimulates syntropy. Okay, it also has the counterforce of entropy. We obviously, however, can take these aspects of nature and transform them into something good, which is one of our roles here as holistic intelligent beings. Green is the middle frequency of the visible light spectrum from the human eyes and is correlated to the Anuhata chakra in the Vedic tradition. So it's the heart chakra. Green is being associated to the language of the birds because it corresponds to both symbolic polarities. It is also directly associated with the fellowcraft, second degree of Freemasonry, which is also known as the middle chamber and is symbolized by heart-based consciousness. So in Freemasonry, when you get to the second degree, this is all about finding your true care, doing your introspective work, going in and facing the heart of darkness and going into your inner temple and unlocking all the rooms within your temple and facing the darkness. It's shadow work. It's really what it is. It's all about shadow work, but it's also about finding your true care and activating your true empathy. So I added this in here because I want to give some examples, and we're about to get to examples of green language. But this one I found pretty profound, and I think it's important to understand. The bird is the word. I'm sure everybody has heard this. As an example of this, the standard adult programming comes from Western cartoons, and we find in the show Family Guy, the song, The Bird is the Word, putting it directly in our faces where the masses will have no idea the esoteric and occult meaning of this phrase. So what is the origins of this? Well, this is the exoteric origins, which is the song was inspired by two contemporary songs by the doo-wop group and the Rivingtons, Papa Oo Mau Mau, and The Bird is the Word. So those are the two songs that were combined together and inspired this whole idea. The Bird refers to the dance craze in the 1960s. The Trashmen noticed the two songs sounded alike, so they mashed them together in a live performance. A DJ at the show brought them into the studio to record the mashup under the title Surfin' Bird. While the Trashman's inspiration for Surfin' Bird is well documented, the exact origins and meanings of the saying the bird is the word is unclear. That's really important to understand. Birds have carried many slang connotations throughout its history, from prostitute to the middle finger. In the context of the song and in subsequent contexts, bird is the word characterizes something as good, cool, or new and revolutionary. Though some would associate this with dark occult mockery, it is far more likely to be a phenomenal example of Synchromysticism. And this is how I would look at this. I would look at this as the universe showing us green language. Okay. The bird is the word. So what is the bird? It's about, we're going to get to the symbolism of the bird here in a minute, but this idea that bird is the word, these combinations is not just coincidence, because this is about green language. And there's a hidden occult meaning underneath all this that most people would never think to look for or think to look at. Now, like I said in this, a lot of people would think of this as dark occult mockery. I personally, I can see the relevance to that. And yes, it's definitely possible that this was dark occult mockery to say, hey, you don't even understand the language of the emerald language or the language of the birds, that's definitely possible. But I think this is more, from my personal understanding and research, this is more synchromysticism. Something that's being transmitted and channeled through us through creative acts. So the language of the birds. Nature cults all around the world use behaviors of birds. for the purposes of integrating aspects of the one great architect of the universe. That's what that stands for, the great architect of the universe, into a personal and cultural spiritual experience. There are examples of contemporary bird to human communication and symbiosis. In North America, ravens have been known to lead wolves and native hunters to prey they otherwise would be unable to consume. In Africa, the greater honey guide is known, which is a bird, is known to guide humans to beehives in hope that the hive will be incapacitated and open for them. Because of their skills, domesticated pigeons were used to carry messages. They are usually referred to as pigeon post if used in the postal service, or war pigeons during wars. Dating to the Renaissance, birdsong was the inspiration for some magical engineered languages, in particular musical languages. Whistled languages based on spoken natural languages are also sometimes referred to as the language of the birds. Some language games are also referred to as the language of the birds, such as Oromo or Amharic of Ethiopia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but there you go. The Ukrainian language is also known as nightingale speech, language of the birds. In medieval France, the language of the birds was a secret language of the troubadours, connected to the tarot, allegedly based on puns and symbolism, drawing from homophony. And an inn called the Golden Lion is allegedly code. This inn is allegedly code, which means in the bed one sleeps. According to Apollonius, the figurehead of Jason's ship, the Argo, was built of oak from the sacred grove at Donata and could speak the language of the birds. Tiresias was also said to have been given the ability to understand the language of the birds by Athena. The language of the birds in Greek mythology may have been attained by magical means. Democritus and Anaximander, Apollonius of Tyana, Melampus, and Aesopus were all said to have understood the birds. The birds were also mentioned in Homer's Odyssey. And this is just one example. There's many examples of the language of the birds in Homer's Odyssey. Although I am no prophet, really, and I do not know much about the meaning of birds, I tell you, he will not long be absent from his dear native land. Not if chains of iron hold him fast, he will find a way to get back, for he is never at a loss. So what I'm trying to show you here is that there is a literary history of the language of the birds, which most people do not understand. Most people would never even think of it this way. But when you start to really get into the synchronicity of everything, you'll really start to understand that that's not actually a stretch, you know, to an astute occult student. So moving on. Here's another example of language of the birds. In Norse mythology, the power to understand language of the birds was a sign of greater wisdom. The god Odin had two ravens called Hugin and Munin, who flew around the world and told Odin what happened among mortal men. So this is a really great example of this. So if you look into the mythology of Odin, you're going to find these two ravens, and these two ravens were speaking to Odin. So these are examples of language of the birds. So moving on, we have Hermes. Hermes the thrice greatest, Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary Hellenistic deity which is derived from ancient Egyptian god Thoth. Thoth was venerated as the inventor of writing, the creator of languages, sciences, and scribe, interpreter, and advisor of the gods. And he is associated with the moon. Thoth was usually represented in human form with an ibis head, and that's a bird. Jehunti was, which means he who is like ibis, he was depicted as ibis bird, as an ibis bird or a baboon. So he also is depicted as a baboon, but as you see in this picture on the far left, this is the ibis bird, and he has the very, really long beak. And if anybody's watched the new Moon Knight, we also have some other Egyptian deities that can be referenced to green language as well. I didn't get to put that in here, but I just thought I would make a note of that. So this is the Emerald Tablet. And I know I'm moving quickly here. I just don't have a lot of time, so I'm just trying to get all this done. So this is the Emerald Tablet. A lot of us know about this. The tablet is compact and cryptic hermetic text. It was highly regarded by Islamic and European alchemists as the foundation of their art. Attributed to legendary Hellenistic figure Hermes Trismegistus, the text of the Emerald Tablet first appeared in a number of early medieval Arabic sources, the oldest of which dates to the late 8th or early 9th century. It was translated into Latin several times in the 12th and 13th centuries. The tablet states its author as Hermes Trismegistus. Like most other works attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the Emerald Tablet is very hard to date with any precision, but generally belongs to the late antique period between 200 and 800. The oldest known source of the text is The Secret Creation and the Art of Nature, also known as the Book of Causes. So why did I bring this up? Well, obviously, this is another example of literary green language. So green language is not just in a verbal form, it's also in literature. It's stored within the words, like Alvin Boy Kuhn was talking about. So moving on, language of the birds, the bard and the bird. So I thought I would add this in here because I think it's pretty relevant to this topic. And we will be getting to some green language, like actual examples of word breakdowns here shortly. So I brought up Shakespeare, okay? And for anybody who's interested in this, I've studied Shakespeare off and on throughout my life, and it's a daunting task, to study Shakespearean literature. It's so daunting. You'll often hear me and Douglas Martin's reference Hamlet in many of our symbolic breakdowns of movies and things like this, especially when it comes to the Osiris ritual from ancient Egypt. But I wanted to connect this to the language of the birds because I think there's some relevance here. The correlation between the word bard and birds is pretty obvious. Just exchange the A for the I, and you have bird. And then if we think about it, and we understand that birds are the messengers, and we understand that they are the, conveyors of stories and songs and, and their representation of higher consciousness, then we'll understand that a bard is also correlated to this on grounds of likeness. So I don't believe that's any kind of coincidence that the name bard and bird is symbolically connected at these roots. So 64 different types of birds can be found spread over 606 occurrences in Shakespeare's writings, from falcons and owls to marlets and starlings and the feathery inhabitants of Shakespeare's aviary all have tasks to serve his dramatic purpose. Some signify the inner nature of his character, some are the harbingers of passing time, and others, such as the falcon and the owl above, announce turmoil in the kingdom, as well as when a humble owl can bring down the prideful falcon. Although Shakespeare was himself likened to an upstart crow by a rival playwright in his time, he still used birds symbolically, metaphorically, and poetically within his work. For Shakespeare, birds were the annunciers of mood and changing times and of the desire and intention of his character. So I also wanted to bring up some puns in literature. I think it's really important. I did say I was going to talk about puns. This is the only part in the presentation that I talk about puns. Not I, believe me. You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead, so stakes me to the ground. I cannot move. and this is from Romeo and Juliet. So the pun in there is soul. Tomorrow you shall find me in a grave, man, and that's also from Romeo and Juliet. I'll re you and fa you. Do you note me? And the note is the puns, and in the one previous to that, grave is the puns in that. So I hope that is pretty clear. But you know, like I said, Shakespearean crypticism is extremely sophisticated. Moving on. So this guy is really interesting in the study of the language of the birds, and I highly recommend you look into his work, especially The Mystery of the Cathedrals, which was published in Paris in 1928. Falconelli goes on to say in this book, what unsuspected marvels we should find if we knew how to dissect words, to strip them of their bark and liberate the spirit of the divine light which is within language. And then he goes on to say in the same book, the instruments of spirit has a life its own, even though it is only a reflection of the universal idea. So his name seems to be a play on the words Vulcan and the ancient, which is the ancient god of fire and volcanoes or volcanus, plus El, a Canaanite name and Hebrew name for God. So the sacred fire is how you could look at this. So his pen name here happens to be a play on words. It happens to be a form of intentional green language, of intentional crypticism being put into this. So moving on here into some other things that I felt were relevant to this topic. This slide I'm calling Mimicking Zootypes. So I'm sure we're all familiar with mimicry, and I know that this seems pretty basic, but you know, maybe some kids can learn from this as well. So mimicry is when a plant or animal or human resembles another organism or inanimate object, either to gain advantages for purpose of survival or for higher means of communication. Some might appear to be more threatening than they really are, and some might appear to just be something other than what they really are. Mimicking zootypes, this is what totemic totemic tribes did and totemic cults did. Mimicking zootype sounds is the process of emulating the expression of the animal kingdom and building a mode to communicate different ideas. Sorry about the typo there, but that's supposed to be for building a mode to communicate different ideas, knowledge, thoughts, emotions, actions, things, places, and spiritual aspects. An example of this can be the sound for the letters G and R. The G and R combined can express aggression. Grr is the sound that we phonetically pronounce when we use G and R. Aggression, aggression. So it means self-defense as well, or even play. So in with wolves, you know, just because they're growling doesn't mean that they are being aggressive, but it can mean that they're playing. It also can be an aggressive play. You know, it can mean many different things. But thus, why the word anger is an expression of aggression, mimicking the animal growl. So the G and R is really important to understand. So we mimic the animal sounds, right? And this is the phonetic sounds of what the animals are producing with their vocal, you know, biology. So their vocal expression. So it's really important to understand because, you know, when it comes to green language, a lot of things that we'll be breaking down here later, we're going to be breaking down with phonetics. Bird-headed archetypes. Now, this is really important. And if anybody watched or listened to the Cubbyhole's recent podcast on green language, which was very excellently done by Nathan Kapp, you'll understand how we're trying to tie all this knowledge back into the stellar mythology or the ancient Egyptian sciences. So, you know, since we're on the topic of birds, green language, we're going to be talking about birds here for a second. So, bird-headed gods or entities in mythology represent anthropomorphized elemental powers and spiritual aspects of nature in relation to ourselves. In totemic rituals, masks are worn to take on the represented likeness of zootypes within nature and the connection to the one great spirit. Each zootype was seen as an aspect or an attribute of the one great spirit. The gods of ancient Egyptian polytheism, ancient Egypt, their polytheism is misunderstood monotheism. And what I mean by this is that the division of gods, such as Ra and Thoth and Set, these are all, people will look at this as polytheistic. But when you really understand the Egyptian mythology and the Egyptian culture, they were actually looking at all these things as attributes or aspects of a single divine creative force, or divine intelligence, or the one great architect of the universe, the one great spirit. Some most common bird mask, like the white pigeon, the dove, the eagles, the hawks, thunderbirds, ibis, hummingbirds, among endless other native to the area in which the myth was created in. So you'll find this mimicking, we'll be mimicking the natural kingdom of the area that we're actually in. And here on the screen, I have the Egyptian deity Ra on the left and the Egyptian Thoth on the right. Bird-headedness is often found in many native cultures around the world, which is derived from the ancient Egyptian mythos and implements. We can look to Native Americans for one of the most popularized symbols of bird-headed symbolism. The Native Americans wear the feather headdress, where each feather is intimately and methodically added to the headdress as a means of passing rites of passage or rituals for an individual's development in life and spirituality. Birds are symbolic of higher states of consciousness. We often see the symbolic expression of a bird lifting the snake into the air, which represents the rising of the Kundalini energy or the rising of the base consciousness into higher consciousness, as depicted on the right side of the image here, of the slide here. Bird-headedness is symbolic of enlightenment and is, in a way, a proof of experience in the advancements of spiritual pursuits and the mystery traditions. So, this idea that bird-headedness came, its sole origins is from the Native Americans is actually false, because we find it all over the world, especially within the Egyptian tradition. So just look at, let's say, Isis or Ma'at. We have the feathers, the feather of truth from Ma'at that she wears. That's symbolic of a higher base consciousness. And the feather represents truth and conscience and law, universal law. And then we also have all these headdresses, right? We see the Egyptians wearing all these headdresses that are bird-headed, So it's really important to understand that. And I will be expanding upon this in the future presentation on this. So what's up with the birds? The three defining characteristics of birds are flight, feathers, and song. As I pointed out earlier, we mimicked the whistling of birds and made it into, songs and musical performances. But we're going to talk about the feathers here. The feather represents light, or like flight. There's a little bit of green language there, Light is in the word flight. So very important to understand, because light in weight, but also is synonymous with frequencies of visible light, which is associated to the progression of consciousness, individualization, and spirituality. The snake's scales are iridescent like the peacock's feather or a prism, which creates the 7 rays of light. In alchemy, the peacock feathers are correlated to the magnum opus, the process of enlightenment or ascension. And magnum opus means the great work. So as we know from our scientific understanding of evolution, we can look at the scales of snakes, and they've evolved into the feathers of birds. Well, it's no coincidence that the iridescent scales have also added to the evolution of the iridescent feathers, such as the feathers of the peacock. So in alchemy, that iridescence represents that transmutation, right? So it represents taking light and shining it through a prism and creating the 7 rays, which is the 7 chakras of our body and our spirituality. So there's a lot more to this, but the peacock is very symbolic, and you'll often find it in many alchemical manuscripts. So let's take a look at some examples of green language. Now we got all that stuff out of the way, you know? I know that was all a mouthful, but I hope that you guys enjoyed that. There's a lot of good information there, and I'm sorry I had to rush through it, but you know, time is constrained for me. So let's take a look at some green language here. The word game, if we break it down, it's G and then AME. And this is aim. If you phonetically pronounce AME, it's aim. Okay. So the aiming of the G. So for the initiated, anybody who knows about the 8 hermetic principles will understand that the G is related to the care principle because it has to do with generation. Okay, it has to do with care. It has to do with generation. So the way that we're going to be breaking down G in this, and you'll see this motif throughout the next few slides, is we're going to associate G to care. It can also be associated to God, goodness, you know, you can associate it to many different things. And in the form G, there's a lot of different symbolism and meaning you can pull out of it, such as the way that you make a G is a C and then a 7, right? So it's the C, the 7. So if you phonetically pronounce C, it's S-E-E, and then 7, right? So there's that sacred number 7 again. So, you know, game is aiming the care. What do we do when we play games? We aim our time and attention, our spiritual attention. You know, we're directing that into something. I'm not saying that's very productive, but that's what a game is, you know. We're directing our care into something for a specific outcome. So Facebook, right? Well, this one's really easy. Just exchange the C for a K and phonetically pronounce that. It's a fake book, obviously. And we all know that Facebook is fake altogether, you know. It's a propaganda machine. And what does it do? Well, we get memes, right? We get memes all over the place on Facebook. And if we break that down phonetically, it's me, me. And what does it mean? It means me, 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 me. It's the satanic selfishness ideology that it's only me that matters. Under this idea that we're sharing all this great information, but really, it's not really about that. It's just really about, you know, hedonism and personal pleasure. And, you know, most of the memes that are shared are definitely 80-90% just hedonistic, right? And I'm not saying there's something wrong with having some good humor, you know, but it's interesting that meme can be broken down phonetically to me. So me, 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 me. Now I want to make it clear here that memes are not unilaterally a selfish thing. I'm specifically speaking about the meme culture where it is fueled by chronic hedonism rather than education. And like I said, it's fine to have, you know, pleasure and happiness in your life. But we should use memes as a conveyor for truths that are critically important. And we need to see more of that through the meme culture. And memes come from um, the researcher Richard Dawkins, and it originated in his book The Selfish Gene. So if anybody's interested in mnemonic evolution, you may look into that because it's really profound when you get into it and the similarities of the gene meme compared to the internet memes. So we will get into some more complex ones as we go forward. So believe, right? And I have an image on the right of a guy blindfolded to blindly believe, right? Let's break it down. A lot of people always outline or underline the put an underline on lie, be lie, right? Well, I broke it down in a different way here. And that's there too, like to, you know, belief. It has the be lie in it, right? So you have to believe in the lie, to be in belief. But this is B-L I Eve. Okay. So B L, it's the bell. And we can also relate that back to Baal, Ball, but also L as in God. So B-L-I, Eve. The L, the I, and the Eve represents the aspects of our consciousness. The sacred masculine is L, which is electricity. The I is the middle, the ion, the third eye, and Eve is the sacred feminine aspect of our consciousness. So sometimes belief or to believe is a very, very good thing if it's harmonized and balanced together. So I thought I'd bring a positive connotation to that today. So culture, right? This word is really easy to break down. I'm sure a couple people have heard this before. It's your cult. So it's cult, U-R-E, your. So it's your cult. And that's what culture has become. It has become a cult, right? So this is one that I found many, many years ago. Bliss, right? If we break this down, we phonetically pronounce B as in B-E, and then less, okay? Exchange the I for the E. So vowels are exchangeable, okay? Just remember that vowels are always exchangeable. They are mutable, they're changeable with each other. So be less. So when you're in bliss, you are being less than what you are. So like the idea of ignorance is bliss, you're being less than what you actually should be. I'm not saying there isn't a positive connotation to bliss either. There can be, but this happens to be one of the phonetic green languages of this. And another one is BL Isis, okay? And there you go, BL and Isis. That's the sacred feminine and sacred masculine. So that's the positive as well, right? So to be with Isis and L, to be in harmony with them. Another good one is Jesus. So G, you phonetically pronounce the J and the E, is just G, and that represents care. And then is, right? So G is us. So, or G's us, as in G, G with the S is G's us, right? So G is us. So it is us, right? So Jesus is us. Jesus is within all of us. And you can also pronounce it yes us, which is yos, okay? So the J-E-S can become yes or yos. And yes us, it means yes us. This is us, Jesus is within each and every one of us. Another one is energy, right? And we phonetically pronounce this the same way, energy, right? Energy. So it's the energy, it's the inner care, it's the inner generative principle. Energy is the generator, right? So it generates out into the world. It's what helps us to create things. And there's so many more you can break these down into. So these are just very simple examples. So atom, right? Or atom. An atom is related to this atom, is at-ohm, okay? And we all know what the ohm is, right? So the ohm is a sacred frequency, right? So the ohm is really, really important. And we hear this in many mantras. So at-ohm, everybody can say it with me, at-ohm, so the atom is at-ohm. I thought that was pretty important to understand. And atom also relates to that as well. And there's many, many more that you can pull out of that. Here's some interesting ones. Solution. So this is salute, okay? S-O-L-U-T, okay? And just add the E there. Salute, ion, okay? So salute the ion, right? So you're saluting, and where do they salute? They salute over the I. Okay. And we all know how we feel about order followers, but I think that there's a symbolic esoteric understanding of what a salute actually is, right? Because it's an honorary expression to each other, and it's been obfuscated to be an honorary expression of obedience and to authority, right? But really, you need to salute the one great spirit, or the truth, the only true authority in the universe, the truth. That's it. So there's some other ways you can break this down. You can break it down soul at ion, and this is also related to salutation as well, right? So you can add that in there. So soul at ion. right? So the soul is at ion. Soul is on. And ion, remember, ion is a charged particle. So not only is it the ion, but ion itself is a charged particle. This is another one I found about cigarettes. This is sonoma, right? So no ma. So no mother, the sacred feminine spirit. And ma comes from mother and ma'am and like, you know, it comes from the Egyptian deity Ma'at, M-A-A-T. So ma'am, M-A-A-M. You can reverse it. It's always going to be ma'am. But whenever you see M-A, it's Ma, which is a reference to mother. So no mother. So no sacred feminine principle in the universe. So no true care. No divine justice. No truth, you know. Gun. This one I thought was kind of interesting. G, care. You know, UN. So it's you in care, you in the G, right? So it's the sacred aspect of self-defense when you're properly using, without violating any individual's liberty, the living in harmony with natural law. You know, so you have to have true care. Not only do you have to have care to be responsible with firearms, but also you have to have true care to actually be able to use that firearm to protect yourself or to protect loved ones or protect others when it is necessary. Another one, which I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, is money, right? So if we phonetically break these down, mon, I, right? So mon means one and I. So you can also use different forms of anything that I was breaking down earlier, right? So like mon is etymologically correct for one, okay? Um, so mon I, if you just pronounce the EY, it becomes I. It's the one eye. And what do they put on all the greenbacks? It's the one eye, obviously. So here's another cool one, galaxy. Now this one's pretty advanced. Um, it's G all axi. Okay, the G is the sacred feminine care or the grand architect of the universe. The all represents all of us, and axi, the axe in the Egyptian mythology, is represented by the Netcher or the NTR, which also represents the great architect of the universe. You'll hear me and Nathan and Douglas talk about the Netcher, and even Mark Passio talk about the Netcher. But you know, the axe is a powerful, powerful symbol. And if you're interested in more in understanding about the gavel and the origins of the gavel or the axe, or Millimir from you know, Thor, or any of these symbols, I highly recommend checking out the podcast Cubbyhole, the Cubbyhole podcast. So horizon, I'm sure a lot of us understand this one. It's Horus and I zone. So Hor, I zone, right? So it's Horus is zone. It's the zone of Horus. But Horus is represented by the all-seeing eye in later Egyptian mythology, and well, correction, in the entire history of Horus, he's represented by the eye, but he represents the sun in this. So the sun, you know, rises above the horizon and then sets below the horizon. So it's the zone of Horus. So there's no coincidence there that is where that comes from. Universe. It's the one verse. Uni means one, and in verse, it's the one song. You know, it's the one saying. It's the one sentence, right? It's the one verse. But you can also just phonetically pronounce it universe, right? So it's the universe. You are the universe. Fractally and holographically, we are all part of the all. You know, so the universe is in the macrocosmic universe and as in the microcosmic universe. Okay, so here's some other interesting ones. We got devil. D means to remove, and then evil, right? So just phonetically pronounce D and then split it off from EVIL, and you have evil. So D, evil, to remove the evil, right? So that's kind of interesting when I found that. Or you can reverse that, which is what, you know, the negative aspect of it is de-live, to remove life, you know, to remove life itself, you know. And you can also look at it as veil, to de-veil, right? So you can remove the veil from your eyes, from consciousness, to remove the veil. And it's also de-evel, right? So de-evel. So that means to remove the sacred electrical principle and magnetic principle of El and Eve, right? The sacred masculine and sacred feminine principle. So let's look at monster. You can break down monster. Yeah, I just said that mon, it means one, but in this green language breakdown, we're going to add another O to it, and it means moonstar. Okay, it's the moon star. And what do we see? We see in all the monster mythologies and stories that, like the werewolf turns under the full moon. The vampires come out at dark under the moon. The monsters come out under the moon, the moonlight. So, and there's a lot more to this that goes back into the ancient Egyptian mythology, and it goes back to Venus. I'm not going to get into all that here, but I have stated it many, many times. There's a whole evolution of this where we start to demonize the sacred feminine principle, and Venus gets associated with Lucifer, the light bringer, and there's a lot to it. But monster literally can be broken down, or in green language can be broken down into moonstar. So Satan, right? So we can break this down into in a set. So reverse it, in a, and then set, right? So you can break that down. So you can see how you play with these words, right? You play with them to find the meaning. So Satan means you are in set. And what does set mean? Set means westing, okay? So in the Egyptian tradition, westing meant death, okay? It meant going into death. And it meant going into slavery, it meant going into moral relativism, going against natural law, okay? So here's a couple other ones, and here's Ma'at, right? So Ma'at, at Ma, so at the sacred feminine, or ma'am, like I said earlier. So Ma means mother, so at Ma. And I wanted to bring this up because we have matter, which is Mat Tir, so Ma Tir, and Tir means terrain, or it can be the Tir of Ma, the tear from the tear duct of Ma. So Ma, the terrain can be the earth or the universe. And then, Ma represents the earth as well, like I just said. Um, uh, One point I like to bring up here is that matter obviously can be symbolic of a physical masculine property. But within all masculine properties or symbolism, we find a bit of the feminine. And that's why I wanted to bring this up, because what did we find here? That when you break down matter into its green language, we find that there is a remnant of the sacred Ma, the sacred feminine principle within it, the tear of Ma. Tear represents emotions. Tear represents, can be positive or negative emotions. So it depends on what we're doing here. Will Ma cry like she's doing now because we are enslaving ourselves and, violating natural law? Or will Ma cry with happiness because we start to live in harmony and create a world of freedom? And then we can look at the word Freemason. So let's break this one down. Free sons of Ma. So free Ma sons, right? So free Ma, which is the mother, and then son, S-O-N or S-U-N. So we're each and every person in the world, each and every person is a son of Ma, but also the light of Ma, the sun, S-U-N, of Ma. So free the sons of Ma. We must free each and every being. And, I'm not advocating for the lodge system here, but I just find it extremely important to understand Freemasonry and its ancient origins into Egyptian mythology. And anybody who knows me knows how frequently I speak about Freemasonry. So let's take a look at some other ones here. Imagination, I-mage, in or at, I on. Okay, so imagination is literally when you have the I on, and you have the magic, you have the inner magic taking place, and you have the magnetism, the creative magnetic force, and your I is on, obviously, and your charge particle, images, right? So I mages, right? So images are I mages, they're I magic. And we can look at mages as Ma's G's, you know, the creative principle of Ma. Magic is mag IC. If we phonetically pronounce IC at the end of magic, then we see that. So mag can also be representative of magnetism, but it's also the sacred feminine, right? So it's the Ma and the G. Mag is Ma and G, IC. It's also magnetism, IC. So here's a really easy one for people. Information. Inform, INFORM, at AT, ION, ION. So when we are informed, when we have information, we're truly informed, we are at ion. So as you can see this pattern repeating, the ion, you know. And then another way you can look at it is inform ma'at ion, okay? So we have inform, okay, in for ma, right? So ma'at, so the sacred feminine. And you can just add an extra A in there and an ion. So, you know, we are in for ma ion. Let's move into some dark occult use of green language. Dark occult use this as a means of covertly communicating or to communicate with each other through things like occult mockery and or to program our subconscious minds through subliminal subversive symbolism, which would be the abuse and inversion of green language. But remember what I said at the beginning, or towards the beginning, is that green is not always representative of something good. It can represent toxicity, sickness, poison. It can represent a lot of negative things as well. And that's what I would look at this as, the dark use of green language, being the poisonous use of green language. So let's take a look at this. And the artwork on the right side is done by Nate Cap. And the artwork in the back as well is credited to Nate Cap, which I forgot to mention at the beginning. Amazing artwork. And if you look right now, you can see the key coming out of the book in the background with the G. So I just wanted to add that in there. But let's get back to it. So police, right? Pole, ice. The poles are iced, okay? The two hemispheres of the brain are iced over. And that's what this means. The sacred feminine and sacred masculine principles are frozen, right? And this is why his heart in this image is frozen, okay? His care is frozen. He has no conscience. He has the checkerboard floor wrapped around his temple, representing ignorance, you know, magically binding his two hemispheres of his brain, you know? And there's a lot more to this, but police means pole ice, you know. And then we have military, right? So we can break this down. MI is my, and then LIT is light, and then ARY is awry. So my light awry. So it's the light of consciousness, the light of knowledge, truth, and conscience is awry. It's no longer there. It's gone, right? And then we can relate this back to soldier. Sorry, this is out of order a little bit, but soldier, because when your light is awry, you are a soul dyer. Okay, so you break down soldier, which is SOLDIER, soul dyer. The soul is in a dire condition. But you can also look at it as sold ire, right? The one who has sold his third eye. Excuse me. He has sold his third eye. So, like on the image here, the soldier has ripped out his third eye, his pineal, and he's giving it over in exchange for money to do the most horrific violations of natural law on this earth. You know, they are literally the bane of freedom. They have no conscience. They do not discern right action from wrong action themselves. And then we have officer, right? So off eye seer, the eye that is the seer is gone. It's off, you know. He has no sight. He has no true vision, right? So these are some really good examples of this, and credit to Nate again for these amazing depictions of this, you know, this symbolism and these synchronistic correlations of the screen language. Those with the eyes and ears to understand this see it for exactly what it was, an occult mockery. This is subversive use of green language. Now, of course, we must be cautious because not every example of green language in culture is intentionally being done. We must look deeper to see if it is beyond interference from man. It's really important to understand. These ones, however, I do believe are intentionally being done. There's no doubt, like whenever you look around the world, you will find the use of symbolism, such as the checkerboard floor wrapped around the Copt's temple. That's intentionally being done. It's dark occult, it's dark Freemasonry, to symbolize ignorance and to symbolize that they own you. They own you. That's how this works. So we'll be moving on now. Vitriol. Okay, so this one is directly related to green language. The alchemical green line consuming the sun, as depicted on the right side of the slide here, as is seen in text as the Rosium Philosophorum. The symbol is a metaphor for aqua regina, and this means literally means regal water or royal water. And this is a mixture of nitric acid and and this is a mixture of nitric acid and hydrochloric acid, which is also called vitriol. The anthropomorphized sun represents man's ego and the claim to be God, the highest of high. The green lion is an expression of primordial elements, elemental forces used to aid in the dissolution of ego-based consciousness in order to bring back balance and resolution to the being and to the planet and the universe. The 7 stars represent the 7 chakra Veda system, but also they are a throwback to the ancient Egyptian stellar mythos and the 7 northern pole stars of the great processional cycle. So for anybody, this is pretty advanced stuff, but for anybody who understands the ancient cosmology and astrotheology and astrology, anybody who's studied the ancient totemic mythologies and the stellar cult, or anybody who's listened to the Cubbyhole, you will often hear us reference the northern polar constellations. And these stars, to me, don't just represent the 7 chakras, but they also represent the 7 northern pole stars for a positive purpose. So we have the lunar and the stellar and the solar cults in this picture. There's a lot more to that picture, but I'm running out of time. So vitriol. Vitriol became extremely important in alchemy because it dissolved almost all substances, which of course was the substance the alchemists were after. The alchemical motto for vitriol is a Latin acronym which translates to Vista Interiora Terrae Rectificando Inviens Occultum Lapidem, which means visit the interior of the earth, and through rectifying or through rectification, purifying, you will find the hidden stone. So the point here is that vitriol is often represented by a green substance, and this has to do with green language, because green language is not just the breakdown of the synchromystic understanding of words and meaning, but it's also vitriol. It's there to dissolve. So whenever you're dissolving the lies, it's a form of green language. You're in green speak, you are breaking it down to get to its pure essence. And that's what this alchemical reference is about, is breaking down something from its impure state and finding the pure state, to get back to its primal essence. So to dissolve the ego, right? So whenever we're using vitriol positively and correctly, we are trying to break down all the lies, mind control, propaganda, and all these things that people are falsely believing in. Literary importance. Literature is of crucial importance to those who wish to bring more collective awareness and help evolve humanity into a higher state. Literature is a reflection of the human spirit, consciousness, and mind. By reading the words of others, of another, we can begin to figure out how that individual thinks, feels, and understands their perspective and knowledge of the world. No book is completely isolated from the co-created existence that we all participate in. Each book overlaps with experiences and events of other individuals. Literature allows a person to step back in time and learn about life on Earth from those who walked before us or experience epic tales of the imagination that go well beyond our physical reality and that some people could never even think of or imagine, through which we can gather a better understanding of the collective culture and consciousness and have a greater appreciation of it. This does not just refer to nonfiction, but also the importance of the expansive allegorical books of fiction. Storytelling is one of the most creative endeavors and important tools of the human experience, which has aided in the preservation of the ancient esoteric mysteries. Literature itself is magic, thus why all words are forms of spells. We spell words with spells. Reading helps to elevate one's mind beyond its limited personal viewpoints. Those who do not read will become doomed to a dull and limited perspective of existence that is lacking color of the imagination, and also puts them at a power differential where they can be extremely manipulated and controlled because of the lack of their education. In periods from ancient Egypt, we can gather their history through hieroglyphics, paintings, and sign language. And I don't mean sign language as in hand language, but it's more primitive than that. The symbols Egyptians left behind are what we now use to understand their culture. This is different to Greek and Roman culture, which is found with greater ease because of their innate desire for their writings. Words have the ability to spark a meaning, reform a nation, and create movements and instill eternal philosophical ideas into all of us. So literature is extremely important. That's really what we're talking about here today. It's not just green language, right? It's green literature. It's green text. It's green symbolism, right? That's why I use the book with the green in it, okay? Very, very important to understand how important literature is. Okay, here's another quote from Alvin Boyd Kuhn on the topic. A study of ancient literature growing more enlightened as it is pursued is revealing the presence of a definitively formulated and high organic truth structure constituted of the essential elements of a great logical systemization of fundamental archaei, or archaei, as the Greek word has it, or principles of a cosmic order of being, expressed in many varied forms of representation everywhere over the field of ancient culture. And what this all comes down to is service to truth. That's what this is all about. That's what the Funnel Conference is all about. That's what my Seed Conference is all about. That's what the great work is all about. Being in service to truth and natural law. Freedom under natural law. Truth can never be destroyed, but humanity can be destroyed when we don't act in service of truth as her defenders. It is possible to co-create a positive outcome, but this can only be accomplished if we care enough to learn the truth ourselves and then develop the courage to continuously speak it to others. That's what we're doing here today. We have the courage, we have the implements, the tools, and we're using them to our advantage to actually bring about a paradigm shift in our world by spreading the truth of natural law. Otherwise, we will continue to live in illusions and continue to believe in the false, dogmatic, erroneous ideas of man's authorities and moral relativity and social Darwinism and epidysgenics and all these horrible, horrible ideologies that are plaguing man, that is creating the current slave system all around us today. And with that being said, we're going to move into the final word. And the final word for today is the bird. The bird is the word. And I'm flying this bird at all those who wish to infringe and encroach upon the innate liberties, natural liberties of any sentient beings. So this bird is a form of green language, and that's why it has the green wings. And it is a sign language, an ancient sign language that is being used to say F you and F no, I won't do what you tell me. No is the final word. And that's what this is representing here today. No, I will not obey. I will not just go along to get along. I will not just be in groupthink. I will not just be another sheep being led to the slaughterhouse. So I am flying this bird in your face, and it is the sacred language of the green heart that is saying no, because I care enough to stand up and do something about what's going on. I care enough to be the change that I want to see in this world. So that's it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry it was a little bit rushed. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that everybody really got something good out of this presentation, got some understanding of green language, and take this knowledge and utilize it in your own daily lives. So until next time, namaste and agape.